Hey, what's up guys? Jack here, and today we're going to be talking about Batman Arkham Asylum. Now, whether you prefer Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, or Batman Arkham Knight itself, there's absolutely no doubt that the best Batman games out there are in the Arkham series, so whichever one you prefer is awesome, but it just makes all the sense in the world to start at the very beginning. So without further ado, let's talk about Batman Arkham Asylum. What is it that makes this game so special? What is it that makes this game stand out so much? Well, I think it's safe to say that one of those things that makes the game stand out very much is that you actually truly get to be Batman. Now, don't get that out of context. We've played as Batman before, right? In other Batman games that were, let's say, lukewarm at the very most. But one of the things about Batman Arkham Asylum, or should I actually just say the Arkham series in general, is that you literally get to be Batman in every single way that you can think of, that you've seen in the movies and that you've seen in the graphic novels and in the comic books. But you're finally in control of those things, and you're finally being put in an environment that truly does belong to the Batman universe. And it's an amazing environment at that. It's the madhouse itself. So basically, the entire presentation of the game is like a big movie that you literally get to control. It's a semi-open world but yet linear at the same time type of game that just really lets you explore to your heart's content until you're ready to move on with the story. And in the middle of all that, you're looking for things, you're solving riddles, you're taking snapshots, you're mastering your combat skills, upgrading your inventory of all your arsenal that Batman has, and just trying to basically figure out how to get from point A to point B while uncovering the story and try to figure out exactly what the Joker is up to. So basically, when the game opens, you've captured the Joker at this point, and you're on your way to Arkham Asylum. But the problem is something just doesn't feel right because it just seemed way too easy. And long story short, once you get in there, just before Joker is put in his rightful place in the asylum, he escapes. But he doesn't just escape. It was actually a plan for him to get Batman in there in the first place, and he already set up plans in order for this to happen. But there's something bigger going on behind the scenes. So let's take it down a notch. And I want to say, from a personal standpoint of my experience with this game, because it is very, very difficult for me personally to talk about this game without giving my own personal experience. So in my personal experience with Batman Arkham Asylum, it was one of the best gaming experiences I ever had. The game came out, I believe it was 2009 when the game came out, and I didn't have the game. My best friend did though, and I went over to his house on, I believe it was Friday after work, because back then that was my schedule. I would be off on weekends. And Friday after work, went to my best friend's house. We were talking about the game while he was actually doing some stuff around the house. And he had just gotten it, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting the game. It looks like it's legitimately good and all that. And he's like, well, do you want to borrow it? And I'm like, I don't want to do that to you. You just got the game. He's like, I've already beaten the game and I've already done everything there is to do in the game. I'm like, whoa. And I'm like, the game is that good, huh? And he's looking at me and he's like, yeah, the game is solid. He told me the game is solid. He told me the game is hilarious. He told me it was great. And he's like, just bring it back when you're done. And I was like, okay. So basically that night I went home around midnight, or slightly after midnight, and I didn't go to bed until 6:30 in the morning, because 6:30 in the morning, because that game was just so good that I just couldn't stop playing it. So I finally went to bed when I could barely keep my eyes open anymore, and I even got up around noon, which is a hell of a lot less sleep than I usually used to get back then, and I would start playing the game right away. The only thing I would I had the weekend off, so I had nothing else to do, no plans or anything like that. I mean, it was awesome. So I would basically get back on, I would play, I would sleep, shower, maybe I'd go to the gym, if that, and then that would be it. Because the weeks at school, back when I was training martial arts, were really tiring. So for me, it was really to stay at home all weekend and pretty much just do nothing but kind of let out steam or whatnot was the ideal weekend. So I spent the entire weekend playing the living shit out of this game, and everything about it was so captivating. When you look at the atmosphere over here, like when you look at, for instance, this of what you're seeing, it's really the atmosphere of the entire game is something that really captivates you in every single way. when you're looking at the surroundings in terms of the artwork and the art style, when you look at how Batman's costume or Batman's suit is really on par with what tradition over the years has done with the way Joker looks, and obviously the voices of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill reprising the roles, which I was very familiar with because I had grown up watching Batman the animated series, and I had actually grown up watching Batman. What's that movie called? Mask of the Phantasm, which is one of the best Batman movies ever made. It was all animated, but it was one of the best Batman movies and stories ever told. And as a matter of fact, I might actually have to go and do a movie commentary on that movie because it was that good. So basically, in terms of everything, like this movie or this game here, which might as well be a movie, is actually really as close to an M rating as you can get almost in terms of the content and everything else. And Rocksteady did it very cleverly, and you could tell right away from start to finish in this game that Rocksteady really did respect the source material and everything in it. And they absolutely showed it in every single way, shape, or form with this game. There is absolutely no doubt about it that Rocksteady was very passionate about this project, and they did it right. I remember a year or so before this game actually released, that I saw concept art of some of the things that would be done with this game, and I was like, wow, this game looks very, very dark. And it looked good, but I was just starting to wonder to myself, I was like, this might even be too dark for Batman fans. This might be, I don't know. But at the same time, we had never gotten a Batman game like this before, so obviously I kept my mind very very open about it and thought very positively of it. And let's not forget that nobody did Batman better than nobody's done Batman better than the British at this point, right? So I mean, we had Christopher Nolan, who did an amazing job with the Dark Knight trilogy, and now we've got, and this game came out after the Dark Knight, so it was like Batman in his absolute prime. It's like it boosted it even more. And so with Batman, it was just an absolute dream to for that game to be the way it was. So they really nailed it out of the park with this, and everybody that was pretty much in the animated series was in this game, in terms of the major voice actors. And from a gameplay perspective, the game itself is actually very interesting, particularly in the combat, which is called the free flow combat or whatnot. And it really does remind you of that whole beat 'em up type of style, but they added a few elements of creativity into the combat, and basically it was fun and it was easy to get into but hard to master, because ultimately if you wanted more points to upgrade all your stuff even faster and better, with more XP and everything like that, you had to basically mix things up in your combos. And obviously finishing a combo with the ground pound was the way to go to really boost up those points, especially after you've accumulated a certain number of points. And the combo counter as well is something that made it very addictive as well, because you looked at your combo counter and you're like, okay, let's see if I can get this number even higher. And the gameplay of it, as simple as it was very addictive. And it was one of those things that actually kept me coming back and playing the challenge mode, because it was just that much fun to play. I think if the combat wasn't fun to play, I don't think I would have completed all the challenge missions and the stealth missions and stuff. So I did the challenge. I did the I'm pretty sure I did the combat challenges first, because like it was just addictive to play. And I even went for the achievement to where you had to get all of the where you had to do all of Batman's variety of moves in one combo, and I'm happy to say that I did do that achievement, and I'm very proud of it. I attempted it many times, and for the longest time I couldn't get it, and then I finally did, and it was very satisfying. But ultimately, that kind of practice and everything else made it better. And like when you look, again, looking at the art style, when you look at all the characters, whether it's Killer Croc, whether it's Bane, whether it's Batman himself, the Joker and everything, everything was done so incredibly well, and the voice acting was done incredibly well. And the way they have Batman use his gadgets in order to get from one area to another, or whether it's to solve something or to open something or unlock something, they really made it to where it's like very believable, to where you can actually be this character and you actually get to live this. And getting all those Riddler trophies, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me it was addictive just to find all those Riddler trophies. I mean, it gave you every single reason to go back and visit areas that you've already visited before, just because there are Riddler trophies hidden there, and you want to like basically get there and solve all those riddles. Or when you look at all those teeth on the ground and you have to basically throw batarangs at those teeth, it was literally Like, you wanted to find everything. You wanted to do everything that this game had to offer. That's how good it was. Everybody, pretty much the majority of people, if not all people that played Batman Arkham Asylum, or even the Arkham series in general, were pretty much completionists because it was very satisfying and a lot of fun to basically find everything and to do everything that the game had to offer. And beforehand, there wasn't a Batman game quite like this. Have there been other games similar to Arkham Asylum, to where you would have to, you would have a structure which was semi-open world like this one, where you had to find a whole bunch of hidden stuff that were hard, that you had to find that was fun to find? Yes, there have been games like this, but in terms of the Batman universe, no. This was the first Batman game to do what it did to the extent that it did, and the game was very content heavy. Like, to complete the game, it took a while, especially if you were going to do everything in the game, which was always great. And then there were the challenge towers, and then challenge towers. There were the challenge missions for both combat and stealth. And to top it all off, you could also play the game on hard. And another thing is that the game, just from a fun factor alone, just kind of tempted you to do everything there was to do. And the game was so good that you had to play it more than once. Like, you would eventually play it and put it down, but then after a while, guess what? You would always come back to it and play it, right? I mean, I'm sure there were some people, before Arkham City came out, which was the second game in the series, I'm sure there were people, especially on the content creation standpoint, that came back and revisited this game because, for one, because it was fun to play, first and foremost, and second, it was kind of to quote unquote prepare them for the Arkham City, which was, they'd be doing a lot of the same things that you'd be doing in this game, but the atmosphere would be a little bit different because it takes place in Arkham City as opposed to Arkham Asylum, so it's a lot more open. And at the same time, yes, there would be different things to do, but ultimately, what are you doing in these games? You're Batman, right? You're going around, you're collecting riddles, you're beating up bad guys, you're uncovering the story at the rate that you want to, and you're upgrading your weapons, solving riddles, taking snapshots, and all that kind of stuff, and whatever new that the game has to offer, which the game did offer new side quests and stuff, and fighting bosses and everything like that. So when you put everything together, it's like, yeah, putting yourself in that mindset and in that gear, like, hey, it's time to be Batman again, is great. And to this day, even though we don't have a new Batman Arkham game coming out, it's really nice to revisit the game, and it's fun to revisit the game. And I know this because I've done this with the first two games. I haven't done the third one yet, although I did play the third one more recently, like within like a year or so ago, and that was fun. And it like immediately, like when coming back to that game, it literally brought me back to what I loved about this game in the first place and what I loved about the series in the first place. And it reminded me that certain games are just meant to be revisited again, which is something that you can't say about every single game, right? And this is one of those games. I remember seeing one of my favorite streamers, Excalizors, for instance, right? He's come back and played this game recently, because actually the whole series recently, because it is just that good. The Batman Arkham Asylum series of games are just that good. When you look, and it's just it's fun to watch, and it's also just as fun to play as it is to watch. How many games can you say that about them, right? To where, okay, this looks fun, but the question is, does it play as good as it looks? Is it as fun as it looks? And the answer to that question is yes. And then obviously with the art style and the way everything looks, it's just absolutely a joy to play, and you're really immersed into this world of the Batman in the madhouse, so to speak. So what's the plot of Batman Arkham Asylum, right? Joker basically tricked you into capturing him, and now you're trapped in Batman Arkham Asylum, and you're surrounded by all the people that you put in there, right? And then there's Warden Sharp that's in there and everything else. So Batman basically Joker actually has a plan to detonate Gotham or whatnot, but there's something else behind that too. He wants to basically use this chemical compound called Titan and release it upon Gotham, so that way everybody kind of turns into one of these super soldiers that you see later on. Well, not super soldiers, but like, roided up creatures that you see later on in the movie, which Joker actually becomes a part of in the end, but But basically he wants to create his own soldiers of Titan warriors and stuff like that, and take over Gotham and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, when it comes to Joker and when it comes to all the villains, like the villains in terms of this specific story, when they chose the villains, they actually did a really good job. So think about it. Who do we have? We've got Harley Quinn, we've got Joker, we've got Bane, we've got Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, Zaz is in this, and then we've got a whole bunch of side characters. You got criminals here that you fight and stuff like that that literally say things to you, like in the middle of the fight, like it's awesome. And whenever you have the stealth missions, have you ever asked yourself, how in the world does Batman take on all these people at once? How in the world does Batman know when this person is, when it's really dark in here, or how is, and they kind of answered this question in this movie, which is awesome. So they answered it like, whenever you have a stealth section in the game, or whether you're doing the stealth missions or whatever it is, the challenge missions, they literally like answer this question. It's like Batman uses his grapple to basically get on top of these gargoyles or on top of whatever, which gives him a vantage point. And of course, the biggest answer to this question is detective mode, right? So with one touch of a button, you basically are able to see through walls. You're able to highlight points of interest or enemies that are around, so you can see them even easier and better. And you could tell whether they're facing you or not, and exactly where they are within your vicinity. So you can choose on which one to take out first and how to take them out. So that alone basically answers the question of, how does Batman know? Like, how does he know? It's like it's pitch black in here. It's dark. We can't see him, but he can see us. It's like, how does he reappear and disappear, right? So things like that are very interesting. Like the bat smoke you can use in this, obviously. You can grapple all over the place and use the grapple in different ways. There's different batterings that you can use, like the sonic battering. So if you want an enemy to go to a specific area, you can use the sonic battering, throw it to where you want that enemy to go, and they'll get curious and they'll listen to that sonic wave and they'll go towards it because they'll get curious. They'll think it's you or something, but then it's obviously not. So it puts them in the correct position in order for you to kind of make that attack. And the way you attack is completely up to you, whether you want to take them out silently, like Splinter Cell style, or whether you want to take them out combat style, or whether you want to combine the two. Because sometimes what you can do is you can proceed to take them out silently, and then you press the button and then you can just hit them and knock them out, which makes a little bit of noise, which would attract bad guys your way. But you'd have, usually depending on where everybody else is on the map, or in that part of the level, you can actually get out of there before they see you. And then they see the body that's knocked out cold, and they'll be like, and then they'd start freaking out and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, it's literally like, it is so Batman. It is so Batman. And Rocksteady was absolutely genius in implementing it like that. Absolutely genius. There's absolutely no doubt about what they did being genius. Like detective mode alone, although you'd be going around the game in detective vision mode like all the time because it just looks cool, and then you just never know what you'd find. Plus it would help you find secrets as well, which detective mode helps you out with as well. And speaking of detective mode, by the way, there are players out there that have come back and played the game numerous times, as I mentioned before, but they challenged themselves by not just coming back and playing it on hard, but they've also challenged themselves by doing it completely without detective mode, like not using detective mode one time, which, believe it or not, is actually difficult because the enemies are a little bit harder to see because of the colors and how this color palette for this particular game looks, and in terms of the map and stuff like that. So you're literally doing things the hard way. Like, you're doing it as if Batman's detective vision mode was like completely like useless, like as if you couldn't do it because it was malfunctioning or something like that. So when you're looking at detective mode and everything that it just answers and what it does for you is just a lot of fun. Oh, and of course, Scarecrow is in this game as well, and his particular parts of the game where you actually run into him and all that is really cool. First of all, I have to say that I love his design. I love all the designs of the characters in this game, but with Scarecrow in particular, is his mask and the way they make him look and the way they make him sound and everything is really really cool. I have to say that it's an amazing design for what they did with Scarecrow. And then whenever you have to beat him, it's basically you get put into this almost like maze-like level to where you have to get from from point A to point B without being seen. And if you're seen, it's basically over and you have to restart it, unless you reach the checkpoint in the middle of it to where you can just continue from there. And every single one of them would get a little bit more challenging, but nothing you can't handle. See, that's another thing about the game. The game is challenging enough to where you like it wouldn't get frustrating. Like, obviously victory is not guaranteed. You still have to play. You still have to like, have approach boss fights and certain other ways, but with some thought in mind in terms of how you want to approach it. And you have to you can't just do whatever you want for every single fight, because like when you look at this right here, when I'm taking out this Titan henchman over here, it's not like you can just walk up to them and just do anything you want. You have to kind of when he charges at you, you have to you have to throw a battering at him, and whenever he's getting ready to throw something, you have to dodge it by double pressing the jump button. So uh, it's very, or double tapping A pretty much. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, is that it's challenging enough, but nothing by any means that is overwhelming. And but at the same time, it's not like victory is guaranteed or anything like that. And what I mean by that is, like, it's not, the game is not a pushover by any means, but it manages to strike the perfect mixture of challenging and yet fun, and in multiple different ways, might I add, multiple different ways, because the game itself is designed to be like that. And whenever you look at the cutscenes, for instance, in this game, and you watch the cutscenes, which are actually very beautiful and even still hold up to this day, there's actually been remasters of this game, but even without the remasters, the game still looks incredible. And it just makes you appreciate it that much more. And also another thing that I appreciate about this game is that, like, some areas, like for the most part, the tone and the color palette behind this game is the same, but in certain other areas there it's a lot more vibrant. And then when you go outside of Arkham and you're trying to go from like one part of Arkham to the other, when you go from outside to inside, it's like it really kind of changes, like the atmosphere kind of changes, despite the fact that it's, it's obviously Arkham, and it has its own tone and feel. I like with the, whenever there's different colors, I actually like and appreciate the fact that they managed to do it right. And that's something that it has to be done right, and they nailed it out of the park. Because when it comes to the sound, I mean, when it comes to every single piece of content in this game and everything that they've presented to us, when you're looking at the sound, and in terms of not just the voice actors, but when you're talking about the music, when you're talking about the other voice actors, and when there's action and when there's no action, when there's a boss fight, when there's no boss fights and stuff like that, everything has to fit together very nicely. And my goodness, did they nail it. So when you're looking at your visuals, you're looking at your eyes, and then you got your ears being stimulated with the sound being correct, and then the gameplay itself is fun, and then the story, you actually want to see it through the end. Even if you're one of those few players that no matter what, you don't really care about doing everything that there is to do in the game, and you just want to get through it, this game tempts you to get through it as well. Like obviously it's the game tempts you to do a little bit of everything in it, like you want to solve all the riddles and do all that kind of stuff. But even though a lot of people are like that, there's also a percentage of people that are not like that, and they just want to get through the game, and that's that, right? So in terms of where this game ends up, it really does tempt you in terms of, I want to finish this. What is going on with the Joker? How will this end? Will Batman make it out alive? Is there going to be a is this going to be a cliffhanger? It better not be, and all that stuff. So it has kind of this slow burn of approach, but consistent burn of approach, of where you're finding out more and more, and in between you're having dialogue, like you just saw here a minute ago with Joker and Batman, right? And then of course there's other characters, and then of course there's other characters like the cops, the doctors and stuff like that you interact with as well, that kind of really add to not only the immersion, but kind of almost like a very brief break from the normal of what you're doing, because you are reminded during that break that, like, hey, this is a story, right? It's a story that you're in and you're a part of, and you have a certain level of control over. But at the end of the day, it's still a story, right? So when it comes to this story, the most important thing to remember is that there are elements that play homage to the source material. And what do I mean by this? I mean, like, when you're looking at let's say the different forms of media of Batman that we've had over the years, right? When you're looking at the movies, and when you're looking at the comic books, the animated series cartoon, the Justice League cartoon, all those different things, there are subtle things in this game. Granted, not everything plays an homage to like every form of media, but there's subtle little things in this game that absolutely remind you of those things. Even like a mention of Metropolis, right, is something that is a nod to that universe. I personally would love it if we had a Superman game that was in the Arkham universe, right? But that remains to be seen. But we'll see if we get something like that, to where we have gameplay elements that are similar to this game, but obviously it would be Superman instead of Batman, and you would have Metropolis, so that the whole tone would be different in terms of the color palette and the type of game that is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a game for kids or anything like that. It could still be very well a T for teen rated game, which this game was. This game was like almost made it to an M for mature rated, and I meant to say teen earlier, not M, but it pushes the T for teen rating for this game, no doubt about it. It's really close, and it's not childish by any means. If you have watched any Batman movie that was towards the serious side and the darker side, or obviously the graphic novels and the comic books are they do have a lot of R-rated material in there, especially when you look at the story of Catwoman. In terms of her particular story, it's very R-rated, and it's something that in this they could have even mentioned it in this game if they wanted to, and it still would have been a T for T rated game. Like, they could have nodded towards something like that, but even though they didn't necessarily do that, I'm just saying that they could have nodded. But in this game, Catwoman was not in this game. She would be making her appearance and then some in the second game. But in this game here, you are strictly Batman. There are no other characters. Well, there's a little bit of obviously you get to talk to Oracle, which is Batgirl, over your communications and stuff. But ultimately this is all about Batman. So you don't get to play as anybody else at any given point in time, except for DLC, obviously, which you get to play as Joker, which originally was for the PlayStation only, but I think they made it to where you can do it for every single console now, if I'm not mistaken, depending on the edition that you get. But the cool thing is that ultimately, it really, you are Batman in this game. There's absolutely no denying that you're Batman, and everything that you do with all the different pieces of equipment and the story, it really does remind you of, like, hey, this is who Batman really is, right? And of course, he's got his wits about him, right? Batman's biggest weapon is his wits, and it's something that's always nodded to in this game, and it's nodded to in all the games, actually. And the fact that you kind of get to use all of these different things at once, like throughout this game, and try to figure out where to go, how to solve this, and how to do this, or how do I get to this spot to get that Riddler trophy or whatever it is something that's addictive. And another thing that they've done is this here. There are therapy sessions, recordings that you have to go and collect. Well, you don't have to, but you do end up collecting. And if you actually listen to them, it actually it's very interesting, because it gets to show you exactly what those characters are like, and in terms of personality and stuff like that. And they're just fun listen-ins. And also the cool thing about this is that there's many of them, including characters that are not in this game otherwise. So for people out there that have certain characters, villains or whatnot, that they really like, villains in particular in this game, they do make an appearance, but they'd make an appearance in the recordings that you just saw right there. So, you know, you got your Batman, you got your Harley Quinn, you've got pretty much like so many Batman villains that are in those recordings. So even though you don't necessarily get to see all of your favorite villains, or the ones that you've always wanted to see but haven't yet, they're nodded to in this game, which is awesome, because they managed. That's one of the things that Rocksteady, you could tell that Rocksteady really wanted to make apparent, and they made it their one of their main missions, to basically make it to where in this game it was basically nodded to where, yes, we want to pay respects to this villain even though they're not in the game, and possibly hint that even though they're not in this game, they might be in the next game. You know, and the way they would hint at that is, for instance, like just having those things in that game in the first place would hint at that, right? It would hint at that, and it would basically be like, okay, what we're doing is like we're not saying this villain's going to be in the next game, but at the same time, it's like, well, we're including them in this game in this form of fashion, but it might be a possibility that they may make an appearance in the next game. So, and the thing about Batman, what makes Batman such an incredible superhero, besides the stories and everything like that, what makes Batman truly incredible is the villains, right? They say you're only as good as the hero is only as good as the villain, right? So basically, that's what one of the reasons why Batman is so incredible. Like his villains are absolutely some of them are mysterious to where you don't completely understand them, which is perfect for Batman because he's incredibly smart, and even he can't fully understand them. So it's like a puzzle that he constantly has to solve. And then there's other villains that are a lot more easy and a lot more understandable, but these villains are also interesting at the same time. And then of course you've got your villains that have tragic stories and that they're good people at heart, but tragedy has struck them and they've turned into a villain in order to do something that they need to do, or to do something that they feel they need to do. For instance, you've got Victor Fries, who is ultimately a guy who's just trying to cure his wife at the end of the day. He's frozen her and he's trying to cure her, and he's willing to go through any means necessary in order to do that. And the thing is, in the middle of all this, you've had something that's happened to him as well. So you've got that going on as well, and he needs to survive and all that kind of other stuff. So they kind of got it right. Even in Batman and Robin, they almost kind of got that right, to where it's ultimately, what does Victor Fries want to do? He wants to survive by stealing diamonds and make his suit and have his suit be fully functioning, right? And at the same time, he's trying to get billions of dollars so that way he can complete his research and find a cure for his wife, because he's got her frozen. So ultimately that's what he wants to do. But the thing is, the way he's going about it is obviously way above the law, and he's doing crimes in order to do so. And so ultimately, obviously, in Batman and Robin, that's ultimately the story of Mr. Freeze. And obviously when it's told in these games, particularly the second one, it's obviously a little bit more heartfelt. It's a little bit obviously darker, but you completely understand and you empathize, because with some of these villains you actually empathize with them, right? Like even with remember, like in the Batman Returns movie, for instance, like obviously Oswald Cobblepot is an evil character, but at the same time it's like you kind of feel sorry for him in the beginning of the film as a baby, because his parents basically abandoned him, right? They basically just got rid of him. Basically so it's like, of course this kid would end up being the way he was, right? So yeah, and in the beginning of the film it seemed like he was just trying to figure out who he was, but there was obviously more to it than that, and he was very bad, very evil. But in the beginning, before all that, you kind of feel sorry for him because he's a baby. He couldn't help but being born the way he was born, and his parents got rid of him. So again, there's always something in some way, shape, or form that is relatable when it comes to Batman villains, and their mystery and their point of view of things is what makes them unique. They're not just your some of these villains are complicated. They're not all cut and dry or black and white. Some of them are just multi-layered with multicolors. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people love about the Joker, as well as the Batman character himself. He's a very, very complicated character. Like, who Bruce Wayne really is the person that's in the suit, right? Bruce, like, this is who Bruce Wayne is. So, whenever he takes the suit off is when he wears the mask, right? Whenever he's playing the billionaire playboy, so to speak, and that's the mask, Batman is who he has become, basically, ever since that night when he lost both of his parents. So a lot of people will say that Bruce Wayne died that night, or that Batman was born on that day. So, which obviously makes complete sense when you look about it. So, so when you put all these elements together, it's like, how can you not be enticed by this story? How, it's like, no wonder Batman is the Batman story and the Batman mythos and the Batman comic books, the graphic novels, the different forms of media and all that kind of stuff. It's like, no wonder they were done, they're so successful, right? And why people are always intrigued by that story and by this character and the characters that are in them, right? Well, that's why. So with this game, but before this game came out, we haven't had a video game that expressed that. And that's why Batman Arkham Asylum, for instance, is considered by many to be the best in the series, because it was the one that started it all, and of course it took place in Arkham Asylum itself, which was, in a lot of people's opinions, and mine included, probably the best setting in terms of like introducing this this story, because it's basic, it's simple, but at the same time, under this basic simple layer, there's just so much more to this particular story. There's so much more to what meets the eye, right? You're not just a guy in the suit going around beating up bad guys and stuff like that. It's like, there's a way to do it, there's a little bit of thought that goes behind it, as simple as it is, it's nothing really too complicated, but at the same time the game makes you think a little bit. but it doesn't make you think so much that it takes you away from the experience of what this game is trying to offer. Even on hard mode, the only thing that the hard mode really does in these games is make the combat a little bit harder. And I mean a little bit. Like, one of the things it changes is, it limits your gargoyle usage whenever you're taking on stealth missions like this, like what you're seeing here. But what it also does is, whenever you're combating villains, you're not going to be able to see that counter button notification come up because you're about to get hit. You just have to do it naturally by heart without there being that notification that pops up. So, and that's perfectly fine. It makes it even more immersive in some ways. A lot of people say that. So yeah, like, again, even looking at this part right here, to where the game kind of cuts from gameplay onto a different part, it does stop. It's not like God of War to where there's no cuts and stuff like that. However, what this game managed to accomplish was, like, it was kind of like next level. Even though stuff like that's been done before, it was done next level because of the particular ways that they designed in order to make Batman effective in this. And it let the player choose, basically. Obviously, there are some points to where with the combat you have no choice. You have to kind of do it stealthily, because if you get caught, game over or whatnot. Especially if you're kind of going after certain achievements and stuff like that, which the achievements were fun to get in this game as well. And obviously, completing the game at 100% was also fun, and the game would obviously keep track of that for you, and it would let you know how far along you were. So even that aspect was a whole hell of a lot of fun. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was like something that every player that played this game for one, like, would come back and play it once every year, just because it was that good. I remember streaming this game actually recently, like a few months ago, and somebody came by the stream and they told me that they come back and play the game numerous times. And as a matter of fact, that was the same person that told me that I've actually asked them this myself on stream. I said, have you ever challenged yourself to beat the game without using detective mode once? And they said yes. So, and they have done it. So I was like, wow. So again, it just goes to show you that this type of atmosphere, it's kind of like the movie. That there's some movies that you just want to see over and over again, right? Like back in the day in 1991 and 1992, like Terminator 2 did this, right? People just wanted to watch that movie again and again and again, right? So with this game, it has what I call the T2 effect, right? To where you want to come back and play this game again and again and again. And for a multitude of reasons, you just feel like going through that experience again, because if you think about it, you're getting a movie, right? It's set in the Arkham world. You're getting a good game at the same time. And the gameplay itself is addictive. As basic as it is, and as basic of a concept as it is in all three ways, it's done in a way to where there's more to it than what meets the eye, than what's at the surface, that it makes the player come back and want to play it again, even years after playing it previously. That's one of the reasons why I bought it. And granted, also why I bought the series was, it was on discount. It was like for like $10 or something like that on the Xbox Live Marketplace or something like that. And I was like, that's a steal. So it sucks that the hard mode achievement didn't pop for me for whatever reason, despite the fact that I beat the game on hard. But and I started it on hard as well, because I was very familiar with it, because I played the living hell out of it. Like when you look at this part right here, when you're looking at the painting of Warden Sharp, that's you have to take a snap of it, and there's other things that you have to take a snap of, and obviously the Riddler kind of leaves clues in terms of what you need to take a snap of. But ultimately, I mean, it's things like that, as simple as they are, that make it fun. It's like, it makes you look around the level. It makes you appreciate that level more, because they haven't just put things in there just to put them in there for the sake of, you're in the madhouse and all that stuff. It's like, no, it's like all the stuff that's in this level or in this particular area of the game, there's a significant reason behind that, and they've incorporated it into gameplay, while at the same time showing so much respect to the source material, as well as respect to not just the characters, but to Batman himself. Because it's like, you're taking something that is so simple, like a painting on a wall, and it's like you're basically making it a part of the game. Like, even when you look at this question mark here, I mean, it's which you can only see through detective mode. I mean, and again, if somebody's going through this game and they're not using detective mode, that basically means that they've memorized where that is, which shows a whole hell of a lot of dedication, even more dedication than myself. I am proud to say that I've completed this game. When I first played it, and I either completed it or got close to completing it a second time as of recently. And I don't regret it one bit. It takes me back to what I loved about this game in the first place. It takes me back to all those years ago of when I first played this game. Uh, it takes me literally, like, you feel like you're Batman. You know, it makes you feel like closing all the lights in your room and turning on the LED lights, and pretending you're in the you're in the Batcave or something like that. Although I don't think Batman has many LED lights in his Batcave, but you guys get the point. You want to kind of be in that atmosphere, right? It makes you, and if you're a content creator, it makes you want to stream the game. It makes you want to put on a Batman mask and pretend to be Batman or something like that every once in a while. It takes you into Batman's world without you literally having to be in Batman's world. And even though being Batman, I mean, if you had the choice to be Batman, when I was younger, I was like, yeah, I would if I had the choice to be Batman, yeah, I would take that choice. But looking at it now as an adult and understanding the Batman character even more, I mean, being Batman is not easy by any means. So it's like, no. But basically, this gives you the best of both worlds, right? It allows you to be Batman without all the consequences and just with all the fun, so to speak, right? And without all the all the stuff that Batman himself has to deal with. So when you look at it, it's like, no wonder this game is loved the way it is. Production for this game must have been absolutely incredible, because when it comes down to things like production, the developers, right, not only do they have to look at the source material, which they obviously did, but it's like, how do you, because ideas are easy, right? I remember hearing Ed Boon say this in an interview. Ideas themselves are easy. It's implementing those ideas and making those ideas work in the project that you're making is what's difficult, right? So these guys had an idea and they made that idea come to life, and they nailed it. They knocked it out of the park with this game, because this game in particular, like, it took an idea and brought it to life, which is so difficult to do when it comes to this scale. And for those of you guys that know anything at all about game development, if you've seen any behind the scenes footage and stuff, well, developing a game is not easy, and then there's crunch time and all that kind of stuff. And the funny thing about this is that nobody had heard of Rocksteady Studios at the time. Nobody had heard about Rocksteady Studios. Nobody knew who they were. So this was a big thing for them. And immediately after this game, and after getting all the praise that it got, Rocksteady all of a sudden became like everybody knew about Rocksteady. And then when the next game came out, like, I went to the midnight release of the second game, and yeah, it was, without a shadow of a doubt, it was crowded, and for good reason. And I enjoyed it, really. I enjoyed every second of it, because it was an experience. It's like all those other players, all those other people that were there were going to do pretty much the same thing that I did. They were probably going to be up all night, and they were going to play the living hell out of this game. And some of them would probably think that they would probably try to complete that game, like, in just one sitting, which just no. No. No, Arkham City, definitely not. And I do these unscripted and uncut, so I need some water, so please excuse me. Cheers. Thank goodness I had some water with me. My throat was really dry after all that talking, but again, when you look at this, like I was discussing earlier, you're basically looking at the outside of the entire property of Arkham, and it's like, it feels different, but yet the same. And you know, you look at your environment, and you're like, yeah, this is about right. And then you look at the building of Arkham and stuff like that. It's like, wow, it's like you know what you're in for before you even step into that building, right? You're like, ooh, this place is going to be dark. It's going to be gritty and creepy. And one thing I also really liked is that they really embraced, like, there would be rain, and it was like, obviously this was a night. Everything takes place in one night in this game. But I like how they embraced the rain and the overall atmosphere of everything. And I actually appreciate the fact that there were things to do not just in the buildings, right? There were things to do outside of the buildings. And on top of that, Batman had a Batcave close by. Go figure. It's like that man thinks of everything. So, which is pretty interesting. So, and then of course you would even have things like tombs right there that you just saw, and things that just really played homage to different pieces of source material, which I'm mentioning again for like the second or third time already by now, but the thing is, like when you do it in the way they did, it's just absolutely absolutely incredible. And Batman fans and comic book fans, specifically people like, for instance, I have a viewer that she's a friend of mine, and she knows the graphic novels and the comics better than I do. And so, like, if she's watching Batman Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and you're going through all these things, and there's homages and stuff like she probably knows more villains, knows more about the other villains that are not as famous in the Arkham universe, that are displayed in the Arkham universe, than I do. Like seriously, like she would know who they are, and I would absolutely have no idea. I'd be like, who's that? You know? So, because a lot of people, like, not necessarily, like, they may not game so much, but they'll look at graphic novels, and they'll look at cartoons or different forms of media that involve Batman and the story behind Batman. So, and even do research and look into stuff. There was a comic book, and I didn't know this until I actually visited a comic book store that was actually, at the time, really, like, it was across the street from where I lived, and I don't know if they're still there or not. I need to take a better look at that and see. But I remember there was even a story in the comics and graphic novels to where Batman faced Predator, and there was another one where Batman fought Spawn. So I'm like, whoa, talk about crossovers. Now, not all of these things have to be canon. I don't know if those stories were canon or not. I'm not sure. But that doesn't really matter so much. Obviously, for Batman fans, you know, what is canon, what is not canon, obviously matters, like when it comes to the core of Batman's story. But the cool thing about this game is that everything in these stories are pretty much, it's a mixture of both canon and not canon, if that makes sense. So, they managed to create a story that is based off of a story that is canon, that was presented to us, and yet at the same time is not canon. So that's why I also mentioned that this game literally is a movie as well, because you're just getting that story, right? So it's just absolutely incredible. And one of the things that I want to mention is it was it was when you played this game back in 2009, it was like it came out of nowhere. I didn't and nobody saw this coming the way it did. Like, nobody saw this coming. Like, nobody thought that it would be as good as it was, right? So I mean, it was just incredible. So when it came to the development of this game, so I want to read this to you guys. It's about the development of Arkham Asylum, and I want to share it with you, because when it comes to development, how can you not want to know about the development in this game? So it says Batman Arkham Asylum was first obviously announced in August of 2008. It was developed by British studio Rocksteady Studios under the Aegis and Eidos Interactive and Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. Eidos obtained the rights to make Batman game in the spring of 2007 and approached then little-known Rocksteady after viewing the developer's prototype at Eidos' request. Rocksteady presented their approach to the Batman license, and by May of 2007, they had begun developing the game's concept, with full production beginning in September. Writer Paul Dini, Batman the Animated Series and Detective Comics, was first approached by DC Comics around late 2007 about the prospect of creating a story for an original Batman video game. Dini found that the idea was intriguing, believing that the new Batman games were based on the original idea instead of being adapted from film or television. DC Comics asked Dini what his approach to writing the new Batman film or graphic novel would be, but one was designed for gameplay. He later met with Rocksteady team, where it was decided that Dini's ideas were in line with what Rocksteady wanted to achieve. By the time Dini joined the project, Rocksteady were investigating the idea of setting the game within Arkham and had produced preliminary designs depicting a huge estate on an island connected to the mainland of Gotham City by a bridge. The cast had not been finalized, but given the setting, it was certain that the Joker would play a large role. The game and story were developed together, and with the limitations of mechanics requiring the story to be built around them, the core aim was to make the game engaging enough for players to spend 8 to 10 hours completing it, especially those uninterested in Batman franchise media. Rocksteady would guide Dini when they thought he was writing too much story or character motivation. Among various, Neil Adams and Frank Miller, who penned the Batman stories, giant mansions in Arkham Asylum, a serious house on Serious Earth, was an inspiration for the game's design. Producer Nathan Burlow said the narrative and atmosphere of the 2000 game Bioshock influenced Batman Arkham Asylum's design. Director Saffron Hill said that the influences on the gadgets and abilities that can be combined and used in different ways came from The Legend of Zelda and Metroid. The design team isolated the components that they felt made Batman and exaggerated these elements. Design ideas which contradicted facets of the character were dropped, and other elements of Batman, such as his refusal to kill his enemies, were strictly enforced, which provided additional challenges in allowing the player to have complete freedom in the game without transgressing in that fundamental aspect of the character. Arkham Asylum was chosen as the setting because it confined the player to an area containing several enemies, which in an open city setting could receive help, return to the Batcave, or otherwise be able to distance himself from his opponents. The development team wanted to include iconic aspects of the Batman mythos and decided early on in production to have Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and Sorkin reprise the roles in Dini's Batman. In animated series as Batman, the Joker, and Harley Quinn, respectively. Hamill has thousands of lines of dialogue in the game, and Conroy has relatively few in comparison. After seeing character models of the Joker's at Arkham Asylum appearance, Hamill decided to portray the character as dark and as gritty while retaining the clownish and playful nature. Although the game features references to the plot events in both the animated series and Batman comics, the story does not directly follow any singular story of depiction of characters. See, just like I mentioned earlier. So let's continue on. The game took approximately 21 months to complete, and Rocksteady began development with a team of 40, which had expanded to around 60 by the game's completion. Combat was considered one of the greatest challenges in developing a game. The system went through 3 iterations. Rocksteady originally developed the game's combat as a full rhythm action game. It was later set to 2D, which involved colored circles and crashing into each other during fights. The final system was based on this 2D model. Combat was designed to be unique for Batman and was given simple control scheme to reflect the ease of which Batman can perform these moves. Arkham Asylum was built on Epic Games' Unreal Engine 3. Eidos president Ian Livingstone had said one developer spent 2 years working on Batman's cape, using over 700 animations and sound effects to make it move realistically. The developers intended the use of Batman characters to use other Batman characters in the game, but these were removed when it was decided that they would not work within the story. For example, Batman's enemy, Mr. Freeze, did not fit in because the character has different motivations to the Joker. Unlike the Riddler, who's obsessed with proving his superiority over Batman, Mr. Freeze does not hold a personal grudge against Batman, and Mr. Freeze would not care about the other villains' plans. A garden maze under Poison Ivy's control was considered as a location. She could not grow it differently directions. So she can grow it in different directions. In this center, Batman would find the Mad Hatter hosting a tea party, but the developers decided those ideas would not match the game's tone. Batman's vehicles, the Batmobile and the Batwing, were considered for inclusion in the game, but developing unique control mechanics and gameplay segments for them would have taken too much time and compromised its quality. The vehicles appear in the game, but players cannot control them. Rocksteady began conceiving ideas for a possible sequel, which became Batman Arkham City, approximately 7 months before development of Arkham Asylum was completed. Rocksteady developed ideas for the sequel's story and setting so the game's narratives could be effectively connected. A secret room containing hints, blueprints, and concept art for the next game was hidden in Asylum's warden's office in Arkham Asylum. The room remained hidden for 6 months following the game's release until Rocksteady revealed its presence. Arkham Asylum's musical score was composed by Ron Fish and Nick Arundel, who also composed the soundtrack for the sequel, Batman Arkham City. So when it comes to the design, to develop the game's overall aesthetic, the main aim was to create designs that would combine comic book style within realism. The environmental architecture and characters had to be extravagant enough to represent the Batman universe, but needed realistic texture and detail. The second aim was to recreate the dark gothic imagery inherent to the Batman universe, especially Arkham Asylum, so that the structure would feel insane as to those whom it houses. The asylum was considered an ideal location because it could house many of Batman's foes. Batman's design was heavily influenced by the work of the comic book artist Jim Lee, who drew Batman as a strong, muscular character and who could believably take part in extreme combat. His black and dark gray costume was based off of modern versions and was military and has influenced excuse me, let me say that again, and has military influences as an industrial look. Approximately 13 concept designs were produced before his final appearance took form. Artists avoided film interpretations of the Joker, partially because the developers only had access to the rights up to the original Batman license. Alan Moore's 1998 graphic novel Batman: The Killing Joke influenced the character's design. Harley Quinn underwent a drastic redesign, removing her black and red full body outfit and jester's hat, and replaced them with a costume with design elements from Nurse's outfit with a schoolgirl's uniform. Wildstorm Lee's comic book publishing company produced concept art for the game. Designs for Arkham Asylum departed from comic interpretations of a large mansion and instead developed into an entire island with hints of Alcatraz prison composed of multiple buildings to allow for greater variety of exploration. Each building was designed with a different architecture style to make the facility appear believable and imbue each location with a history. The medical building was inspired by Victorian architecture, and its metalwork structure was intended to inspire feelings of horror. The intensive treatment unit has a Gothic industrial aesthetic. The catacombs beneath the facility inspired earthly 20th century brickwork with Victorian industry were meant to feel oppressive. The maximum security area was designed to feel claustrophobic and was refitted like a bunker, and the Arkham Mansion displays a high Gothic style. The designers integrated crooked lines into environmental objects such as trees and drain pipes where possible. 40 rooms, 34 corridors, 3 exterior areas, and 3 scarecrow-induced hallucination areas were designed for the game. To bring these areas to life, the level designers produced the game mechanic elements using simple room layouts and shapes, while concept artists worked in tandem to create artwork for each location. Following the art direction, environmental artists would then build 3D layouts based on those designs. Finding an appropriate color palette for the game would prove difficult. Browns and monochromatic colors would depict the desired dark, moody atmosphere, but the developers wanted an aesthetic to resemble the vibrant color schemes of a comic book. To this end, they used saturated colors for in-game lighting, and was important to in-game lighting and lightning was an important component into the game, being used to highlight points of interest and to allow the player to onward otherwise boring corridors. To maintain the intended level of detail to allow the game's console versions to fit the device's memory, each area had to be streamed in and out of memory seamlessly to free up memory for textures and geometry. All the cutscenes were storyboarded by Rocksteady artists, being visualized in the game engine before the character performances were motion captured. The design team decided that cutscenes would be used to advance character relationships, and that for each cutscene the player should have had their goal changed or the importance of actions modified. Priority was given to keeping action scenes under the player's control rather than showing them the cutscenes. So yeah, now I want to go over one more part of this, which is the release, and I think yeah, obviously the reception was incredible of this game. Like, people obviously really took to it very well. So, and the game actually sold very well as well, as far as I know. Yeah, it was obviously released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. So we know that. So actually, we're not going to go into release. We're going to go straight into reception, actually, because we all know about the release. So Batman Arkham Asylum received critical acclaim. Aggregating review website Metacritic gave the Xbox 360 version a 92 out of 100. The PlayStation 3 version was a 91 out of 100, and the Microsoft Windows version a 91 out of 100. The game held Guinness Book of Records of most critically acclaimed superhero game ever, based on the average Metacritic score 91.67, until it was succeeded by Arkham City. Arkham Asylum was called one of the best comic book superhero games ever made. Edge magazine said it was by some distance the best superhero game in modern times. IGN's Greg Miller called it the greatest comic book game of all time, and Eurogamer's Dan Whitehead called it the best superhero game bar none, and wrote it was excellent visuals, a compelling story, and superb voice acting. Whitehead also wrote that without the iconic superhero, it would be a polished and engrossing game featuring compelling story and superb voice acting. PSM's Andy Kelly wrote, "Rocksteady have struck the perfect balance of giving you the confident power of a superhero, but with enough weaknesses to make the game challenging. A remarkable feat for balancing and design." Wired's Chris Kohler said that the game's strength lies in its tight script and masterful acting. Marketing, making what could be generic game captivating. One-Up's Theory Nugent said that the game gave the game an A-, stating that Rocksteady manages to combine combat, stealth, and storytelling and cartoon voices into the best digital Batman simulator we've seen to date. Several reviewers compared Batman Arkham Asylum to other games, including BioShock for its ability to deliver unique adventure and establish connection with the game world and its innovative ideas, The Legend of Zelda for its adventuring style, Metroid for its world layout, and Resident Evil and Tomb Raider for its classic action adventuring that acts as a true hybrid of brawling, stealth, and platforming. The game's world design and the game's attention to detail were also well received by critics. Game Informer's Andrew Rayner said the game's setting had a taut and a mesmerizing atmosphere and was a place of wonder and explicable horror. Miller called it the right mix of creepy and cool and appreciated the gradual damage reflected on Batman's suit as the story progressed, but said that pixelated CGI and lip-syncing issues diminished the presentation. Whitehead said that the impressive animation makes Batman feel alive, but wrote that the world itself was lifeless and lacking interactive objects. He criticized segments in which character logic was sacrificed for video game tropes, citing repeated use of the poison gas and electric floors as obstacles. The combat system was well received for the simplicity of its implementation, allowing players to use it effectively without learning complex combinations of specialized moves, and the emphasis about timing and flow to create fluid, graceful, and satisfying brutal attacks. Reviewers said that the combat remained challenging with the inclusion of the more difficult to overcome enemies, and better use of the combat was well incentivized without punishing those who master it. The design of stealth and the wide variety of methods available to disable enemies to opponents were praised. Computer and Video Games Andy Robinson wrote that it's thinking man's stealth game and that it's centerpiece of the game, and The Edge said that the stealth offering was thrilling. Others wrote that about the way that the enemies react with fear to the elimination of their allies, but some reviewers criticized the AI for allowing Batman to easily escape when discovered, and for being obvious to Batman's presence. Whitehead said that the stealth was not directly rewarding as combat, citing difficulty in controlling Batman in close quarters with the inconsistent contextual actions. Arkham Asylum's boss fights were criticized, with many reviewers labeling them as the game's biggest failing. Reviews found that the battles often were old-fashioned, tedious, and repetitive game tropes that required the player to learn and repeat monotonous routines, some of which, in the case of Bane, had already been employed in lesser enemies, to confront repetitive attack patterns and one-hit deaths. Reviewers generally agreed that the fights were anticlimactic to their build-up spectacle. The final boss fight with the Joker was signaled out of vapid gameplay. A battle with Killer Croc was labeled as boring and overly long, and the reviewers said that these should not have been in the game. However, the fear toxin-induced hallucination segments of Scarecrow's battles were almost unanimously praised as some of the game's best and most cerebral moments of their fourth wall manipulation, subversion of the game's established narrative expectations, and meta-textual influences that were compared to the battle against Psycho Mantis in 1998's Metal Gear Solid and 2002's Eternal Darkness. The main voice cast, including Conroy's Batman, Sorkin as Harley Quinn, and Valenza as Poison Ivy, and Wingert as Riddler, was well received. But Hamill's performance received consistent praise, with reviewers commenting upon his excellent inflection of timing and crackling, maniacal performances that steals the show. Nugent said that Damian Hamill's Joker was the best depiction of the characters outside of the Killing Joke and Heath Ledger's incarnation of the Dark Knight in 2008. So, at the end of the day, Batman Arkham Asylum was absolutely something that was, was truly magical, and it was truly praised. And at the time, like I mentioned, at the time that it came out, it couldn't have been better timing. It was it was after the Dark Knight. It was depicted in a way that we've never seen before, and it was the best comic. Like, people said it themselves. We're not just talking critics here, but people said themselves that this was the best at its time. It was the best comic book game that was ever made, which is huge because we had yet to have that, and we had plenty of comic book games, but not quite like this. So in a way, it kind of inspired other games out there, and it actually proved that yes, you can make a comic book game really, really well. You can do a really, really good job with it, and you can make it a superb product. So at the end of the day, I want to finish off with something about the legacy. So Arkham Asylum's success launched a series of Batman Arkham sequel beginning in 2011 with Arkham City, set 1 year after the events of Arkham Asylum, and its direct sequel to the earlier game. It was developed by Rocksteady Studios and distributed by Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, manipulated by Hugo Strange. Gotham City's Mayor Quincy Sharp closes Arkham Asylum and Blackgate prison, and conceives activities in Arkham City. And it conceives a section of the city's slums into an open air prison known as Arkham City, the house of all Gotham's criminals. While a wary of Batman watches over the activities in Arkham City, the Joker is dying from his consumption of Titan. The sequel introduces several new characters, including Hugo Strange, Robin, Catwoman, Ra's al Ghul, and Mr. Freeze to the series. A limited 6-issue comic series, also titled Batman Arkham City, bringing the plots of Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, was written by Paul Dini and featured by Carlos Danta. And the first issue was released in May of 2011. A third installment of the Arkham series, not developed by Rocksteady, Batman Arkham Origins, was released in October 2013, featuring a story set before the events of Arkham Asylum. A narrative sequel to Arkham City, Batman Arkham Knight, was released in June 23rd of 2015 and is the series' concluding chapter. Writer Grant Morrison said the game was an inspiration to their Batman Incorporated comic book. They said that they wanted to capture the feeling of Batman Arkham Asylum, the game, and when I played the game, it was the first time in my life where I actually felt that it's what it's like to be Batman. We are now the heroes, and now we can look through their eyes. So I wanted to say that at the end because I thought that was a really good way to basically say in one sentence or just a few sentences of what it really feels like to play these games. And it is an absolute pleasure to come back and play them, and there are very few games to manage to actually do that. Batman Arkham Asylum does it flawlessly, seamlessly, and you just have every single excuse for at least every once in a while to come back and play this game. So with that being said, that concludes my Batman Arkham Asylum video, my Batman Arkham Asylum retrospective story, whatever I decide to call it by the end of it. But Batman Arkham Asylum is, in my opinion, probably the overall best superhero game ever made. Even though Batman Arkham City, in a lot of ways, and in my opinion, was even better, this game cannot be beaten at the same time because it was the first to do what it did. And there would be no Batman Arkham City without Batman Arkham Asylum. So this game is the origin to all of that. So therefore, this game deserves that praise and that title. So thank you to Rocksteady Studios for developing this game and giving my favorite superhero the kind of treatment that he truly deserves, as well as every character in it. And I had a blast with it, and I hope to see you guys do something like this in sometime in the future, whether it's other characters or whatever it is. But thank you to Rocksteady Studios. This really was a marvel of a game. And with that being said, as I close here, I want to pass it on to you guys. What does Batman Arkham Asylum mean to you? What made this game so special for you? How can you describe your experience with the game? I would love to know down in the comments section. Thank you all very much for watching and or listening, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.